Welcome to Just a Chat With, a brand and creativity podcast with the world's best in class. I'm your host, Andrew Dobbie, and on today's show, I'm joined by Lars Bastholm. Lars has previously worked as the Chief Creative Officer at Google, leading the Zoo, which is their global creative think tank for brands and agencies. He then created the Exploratory, their business innovation team working with Google's top customers to crack their most challenging problems using tech, creativity, and product development. As well as these roles, Lars has had many previous senior roles. He's also held Chief Creative Officer at Ogilvy, AKQA, along with many others. And he's now the founder of Bastholm Creative Consulting and the co-founder of the Scandinavian Creative AI Summit. Lars is a real expert in all things AI, and we're going to get deep into that today. We're both just back from Lithuania, where we shared the stage together, talking at the Baltic Brand Forum, which is organized by the fantastic Andris Rubens of Magic Agency. Lars, welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here.
How are things?
Not bad. I actually got back from Poland last night. I was in Warsaw talking to a group of film producers about AI, oddly enough. Just a quick one-day trip to Poland. You know, you get up at 3:30 in the morning, you arrive home at midnight. What's not to love?
Absolutely. And for our guests, can you let us know, where are you now then in the world?
Right now, I'm back home in Copenhagen, where I'm based right now.
You've obviously had a super creative career. You've had so many of those roles that are like the kind of roles that people in creative jobs dream to work in. I just want to help us figure out how you got there, because we've often got a lot of young creatives on this show, and especially now in the world, trying to figure out your way into the creative industry is pretty challenging. So I just love it if you could take us back and tell us, how did young Lars get into creativity? Is it something that's been in your family? Was it something that was nurtured? Is it something that you fell into by accident? Maybe just give us a bit of a run through.
Happy to. Basically, it's completely by accident. So what happened was I had just graduated from college with a master's in film and English, or American Studies rather. And you know, that's basically the most perfect way to ensure that there are no jobs waiting for you anywhere with the degree in the humanities. So I'd gotten a job in Copenhagen working for a film company, like the Danish version of Warner Brothers, basically. Mm-hmm. It turned out I genuinely sucked at it. It was mostly just PR. So after about 3 months, I got fired. And, you know, your first job out of college, you get fired after 3 months. You're like, holy shit, my life is over. And then on the back of one of the Danish newspapers, there was this little ad saying, we're looking for a copywriter for Grey Direct. You know, mm-hmm. the direct marketing arm of Grey. And I honestly did not know the first thing about advertising. It was never something that had been on my radar. But I was talking to a couple of friends about it, and they're like, well, you're good at bullshitting. Isn't that basically what you do in advertising?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I was like, well, I'm sure that's part of it. But anyway, so I sat down and wrote, apparently, as I recall, it was a story about the benefits of inflatable animals as spokes animals. And it was apparently silly enough that it got me in the door. And so I got a job in there as a junior copywriter back in the mid-90s.
And for those who don't know what direct marketing is, can you tell us a bit about that? Because that's might be a new term for some people.
It was essentially writing letters, actual letters that arrived in your mailbox, not the electronic mailbox, the actual mailbox, the thing that's sitting out front of your house if you have a house. And you open them, and it was all very personal. Mm-hmm. It was really about understanding your customers to the nth degree, so you could address whatever you had to sell to them in a way that made sense to them. Mm-hmm. Funnily enough, it was a skill that I picked up there that stood me in really good stead later on in the digital age, where everything started getting more and more personalized. Yeah, but anyway, that's sort of where it all began, and then something really interesting happened about 3 months into my tenure at Grey Direct, which was that we got a computer installed that had access to the internet. Yes, kids, that was back in.
I'll never take off. Never.
I was 25. I was nerdy, and I figured out that this internet thing is actually quite interesting. So I went down to the local bookstore and I bought a copy of the Internet Yellow Pages. Yes, that was a thing. It literally had the URLs of all the most important internet websites in the world in the Yellow Pages.
How big was it at that time?
I mean, not that big. It's like a regular phone book. I really kind of wish I kept it because it would have been a fun sort of thing to have.
Yeah. It'd be
Uh,
worth millions now, that thing, wouldn't it?
yeah, but just jumping ahead. So that led to me eventually connecting with one of the account directors there, and going, we should start something with this because I think there's going to be people wanting this. And we built Grey Interactive and
Mhm.
started that in Scandinavia. Then after a couple of years of doing that, I got a call from a guy called Tim Frank Andersen here who had started a company called Networkers, which was the first 100% digitally focused agency in Denmark.
Wow.
And his call was like, his first line, I'll never forget, was, do you want to come change the world with me? And I'm like, you don't get a lot of calls like that. And generally when you do get a call like that, or if you get a call like that, the answer is always yes.
Yeah.
So yes, I said yes to that. And we ended up joining forces. I think I was employee number 11 or 12. And we grew to about 300 people over the next few years.
Wow.
And we had a couple of massive strokes of luck, among that landing Nike as a client. And so we ended up doing a lot of the most successful Nike websites back in the late 90s, early 2000s, winning a shitload of awards in the
And
process.
they were ugly websites back then. I remember them.
Awful. I mean, the funny thing is, if you look at your portfolio from that time today, you're like, really? That was considered good? But of course,
I remember before CSS arrived. Remember you had to build everything in tables, and then CSS arrived, and it was like, holy shit, this changes everything, doesn't it?
well, I mean, I remember when Flash arrived, we did some of the world's first Flash games for Nike football, which was just, I mean, incredibly primitive when you think about them today. But at the
Mm.
time, it was utterly mind blowing that it worked.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think for some of the younger ones listening, they'll not even know what Flash was, will they? So it was kind of an animation-based tool, Macromedia Flash. I don't think it's been turned into anything now, has it? Is it just gone completely?
it's completely gone. It was after Steve Jobs basically said it takes up too much battery when you run it on mobile devices. So he was like, I don't want Flash on the iPhones. And that is effectively just killed Flash completely dead.
Yeah, and it was also a big problem, wasn't it? Like if you built a Flash website, it looked amazing, had all this animation, but if someone didn't have Flash installed, there was just a big empty space where that content was, wasn't it?
And you had all these loading sequences. There used to be a website called Preloaded that collected all the best of the Flash loaders, because that became sort of an art form in and of itself, right? Like a trailer for a website that you ran while the content was loading.
It was. That was like a genre, wasn't it? And there was like studios, like, was it Too Advanced Studios?
Too
They were
Advanced
kind of a famous one at the time.
Yeah, and Big Spaceship did some amazing stuff as well back then.
Yeah.
Super fun. I mean, and the fun part of this was that we were essentially inventing this whole thing as we went along, right? I mean, there was nowhere to look for, this is where you're supposed to be going with this, or this is what you're supposed to be doing. Everything was stuff we were inventing on the fly.
Yeah, so it sounds like you were kind of riding the dot-com bubble, which
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
quite interesting because we're in another sort of one of these moments. And like you've obviously always been an early adopter. You jumped into that. You're in the first digital agency in Denmark. You've grown that big team. And then we're now fast forward, we're in this AI moment, which, I remember it kind of feels quite similar, doesn't it, in terms of a lot of the newness?
It does. I mean, I've said it a couple of times that this reminds me very much about 97 or thereabouts, where things are happening hard and fast. The only big difference is that things are happening even faster now than it did back then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's 100 times the speed, isn't it? And trying to keep your brain up to it. Now, I want to get to this, right? But I don't want to miss out.
Right,
There's been a big chunk of your life.
right. So let me
Yeah,
go
it's from
back
that
to this.
era to this era. So let's jump back to there first and take us through that.
So we won a bunch of awards, like a bunch of Grand Prix in Cannes for the work we were doing for Nike, which then ultimately led to me getting invited to open up the first AKQA office in New York.
Okay.
Obviously, they must have been thinking, I think the good thing here is if we fly some Danish guy into New York and just airlift him into the city and see what the hell happens. I can't think of many other rationales behind it, frankly. So that's essentially what did happen, though, is that I arrived in New York, I find office space, I get internet installed, buy some furniture, and then I'm like, right, we probably need some clients to pay for, the rent and the computers and all that stuff. But that was, I mean, a most incredibly fun ride. This was in 2004, and we ended up, growing that office in the next 5 years to about 150 people, landing accounts like Motorola, Coke, Global, Smirnoff. just really fun clients and fun times. I mean, also crazy times. I mean, I was working 6, 7 days a week, 10, 14 hours every single day. But it
Wow.
didn't really matter all that much because it was so much fun. And it was a group of people who were really passionate about what they were doing.
Yeah.
And we had people from all over the world. And that was one of the wonderful things about being in New York, is that you really have the entire world there, right?
And your role then, Lars, was kind of just sort of leading the creative charge, the creative output of everything. Like, can you talk through that, how that, because you're sort of like chatting around these numbers, leading teams of 300, 150, but for most people, that's like, they've never been there, they've never encountered that. And I'm just interested to hear kind of what that feels like, what your kind of leadership style was, and how you get the best out of these teams, because you're obviously, very, very good at doing it.
It's interesting. You should ask that question, because one of the things that I had to learn in when I arrived in New York, because I'd been working out of Scandinavia, I mean, mostly in Scandinavia and the European market. When I arrived in New York and suddenly I was leading creatives from many different places around the world, I had to sort of stumble into the realization that different cultures really do take to different leadership styles, right?
Mm,
So my inclination as a creative leader has always been to sort of gently guide people to reach the target themselves.
yeah.
So set the parameters and give you, here's a playing field. Here are some of the tools or toys you have, and here's the objective that you're racing towards. Now find out how to get there yourself.
Mm,
That works incredibly well with some people. Basically, give them the overarching objective, and they'll find their own way.
hmm
Whereas others need to be told in much greater detail. This is what I want from you. This is how I want it. This is where I want it, etc. And the interesting thing is, if you confuse the two and brief people the wrong way,
mm,
you're going to get terrible results out of it. So you have to kind of get to know people a little bit to understand what works with them. And I
yeah.
think that's true for most creatives. Like some respond really well to tight briefs and tight directions, and others respond much better to like a green field where they can just go ahead and figure out how to get to the promised land on their own.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight, for anyone leading creative teams. And I found that myself. It's like, you have to know the person in front of you, don't you? Because that's I suppose the magic of creative people, but also the challenge of creative people is sometimes we don't conform to the same ways of that our brain works, the
Mhm.
same way our brain puts things together. And sometimes it's hard even to kind of how do you put certain creative people in certain teams and certain roles. And I can't remember who I was speaking to recently. I think actually it was Ben from Lego that we spoke at with the Baltic Brand Forum, and he was saying, sometimes what he finds at Lego, because he leads a creative team out there. I think there's 300 people, in that team, and he says sometimes there's kind of there's these people that just don't fit naturally in any team, but they hold immense value. They've got great value to bring to the creative process at some point, somewhere. And he calls them at Lego ICs, individual contributors.
Yeah.
They're not a specific person that you can place. It's they're not an art director, they're not a creative director, but they've just got some madness that needs well wielded in some way or another.
I mean, I think all agencies, especially when they grow to a certain size, need some of those. I mean, it's almost like in warfare. Sometimes you need the flamethrower, right? And sometimes you need the sniper. And if you can shoot at you, you're in a world of shit. And
Roll the flamethrower in. We need them. We need that brain right now.
you always need to talk a little bit about flamethrowers when you talk about running agencies, right?
Absolutely love that.
Interestingly, then when I left AKQA, it was because Ogilvy came knocking on the door, and I was intrigued by the possibility to try and help out. What was to, I mean, on all intents and purposes, a bit of a dinosaur. Very classic, old-fashioned ad agency, but they did have great strategic rapport with their clients, meaning that you really got to talk to the head. Because oftentimes in digital, what we're often we talk to the digital brand manager and the people responsible for that part. Whereas at Ogilvy, I figured I could actually get to talk to the CMOs and the CEOs, and that would make a difference in what you can sell in and how you can think about the brand. But so they put together this weird role for me as chief digital creative officer, which didn't really make a whole heck of a lot of sense. So a year later, I ended up taking over as the chief creative officer of the New York office, which is the biggest office in the Ogilvy network. But then all of a sudden I had 250 creatives under me. And, it's one thing to have an agency with 250 people, but 250 creatives, then, I mean, and going back to what I said before, the challenge then becomes you don't really know everybody anymore. There's no way
Yeah.
you can. You can't know their individual strengths. You can't know what they're good at because there simply isn't enough hours in the day to wrap your head around every single person.
Yeah.
And that becomes a weird role, right? Because that's true management. It's not really a creative job. Of all the jobs I've had over the years, was probably, frankly, the one I liked the least because I was so far removed from the creative process.
Yeah.
It's mostly when shit hits the fan, it's your fault. When everything's going smoothly, you might as well stay home. 'Cause you can't dive in, and you can what you can do is help your ECDs, who are running the day-to-day of the individual accounts, to reach their targets, but you personally cannot really be all that involved.
Yeah. So do you, so you'd really in that type of role then? So you've kind of got an army of ECDs under you. They've got their creative directors and so on and so forth. But I think what you're saying there is kind of sometimes in those roles, even though you've got that chief creative officer title, you end up in this kind of management,
Oh, yeah.
HR, ER, fighting people problems and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's a tough balance, isn't it? Because like we often as creatives, we get into these roles because we love creativity. And I know you do have to spend time with you. We were just like, but the more and more up the rank, the creativity almost gets pulled away and you get pulled into this drudge that
Yeah.
we don't want to be in, but it's a requirement and it's almost like a necessary evil, isn't it?
It's a really bizarre, thing for our industry where we take oftentimes the best craftsmen and turn them into people managers,
Yeah.
which so many of them are actually absolute shit at.
Yeah.
I mean, I was terrible in the beginning. I think I kind of grew into it over the years, but Lord knows when I was first appointed creative director at about 27 or 28, I didn't know what I was doing, like at
Yeah.
all. I had no clue. And there's no course, or at least it wasn't back then, that will tell you, so this is how you should manage creative people. You literally just throw yourself into it and hope that you have enough empathy that you
Mm.
will arrive at least a somewhat semi-functioning way of engaging with the people around you. Um, but there's no specialist track in creativity or in professional creativity in agencies, which is such a shame. And I've
Mm.
often thought that there should be, like an art director, senior art director, executive art director, so you could stay in the lane of doing the things that you absolutely love doing and are really good at,
Yeah.
versus having to jump over and become a creative director, an executive creative director, chief creative officer, blah blah blah. Because I think most people would be happier that way, really refining and honing their craft
Mm.
versus jumping into, because it is a political quagmire if you end up in one of the CCO jobs at the bigger organizations. It really is. I mean,
Yeah.
a good 50% of your time is spent on corporate politics, and
Yeah.
Lord knows it's not very fun. But of course, there's also an element of it where you're chasing the money as well. Because I mean, at least it used to be fairly well compensated, and you hit like a ceiling if you're on a specialist track where you can't really get more money out of an organization because that's just not how everything was structured.
Yeah.
But every time I talk to people now about when they're thinking, I'm an ACD or I'm a CD, should I go for these other bigger roles? I'm like, be really careful what you wish for. Like, be really careful and just realize that it is a different job, and it will be a very different job. And you should try out running like a team first and see if you actually enjoy that or if you enjoy doing the work more.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really great insight and a great piece of knowledge to pass down, isn't it? Because it's, I found it myself running a creative company is like, probably from the outside in, you'd imagine my days like a circus and full of creativity. But the reality is I started as a creative and that's what kicked off, the agency, and then it grows, but then suddenly you're dealing with cash flow and money and all of these things that kind of keeps our brain away. And, I think a lot of these things, they keep you in a kind of fight or flight mode. And it's very, very hard to be creative, right? When you're in that fight or flight mode, when you're trying to feed people, feed yourself and, manage problems, you kind of, it's very, very difficult to get into creativity zone, isn't it? Because you kind of,
And it doesn't come natural to a lot of creative people, that whole thing,
mm,
sitting down with spreadsheets, doing forecasts and thinking about
yeah,
headcount and all that stuff. And you kind of have to. Uh,
hmm,
I mean, I do think, though, that some of the best CEOs and leaders in our industry are from a creative background because they understand the product that we're selling.
Yeah.
and they're capable of keeping the focus on that to an extent that maybe people who came up through finance don't fully understand, or they don't necessarily care what you're selling as long as
Mm,
you're selling something, right? I think CEOs from creative background care more about the work.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe the solution here is right. I mean, I've found it better now that I've got access to like ChatGPT, these kind of tools, because often, like, my brain, my creative brain feels chaotic and unstructured, but I also know that's maybe the strength of some of it, right?
Mhm.
But what the GPT gives me now is like access to some structure, so I can throw stuff in. If I'm dealing like with management issues or like trying to create some structure around some thoughts and ideas, it's great because I feel like I've got this co-brain that's now like presenting it back to me and helping. So maybe the solution here is, Lars, we just get the AI to do the management bit and leave us to be creative, right?
Someone was asking me the other day if I thought that that an AI could be the ECD of an agency anytime soon. And I'm like, let me get back to you on that one. I don't think we're quite there yet, but soon, define soon. Um, anyway, if you just want to continue the oh, I was trying to
Yes, we're in New York. We're
long
AK.
story short, but I think I'm there already. Uh, but then I've had a quick stint with Shell, which is a Korean holding company owned by Samsung. They wanted to open up a US group, and I thought that was pretty interesting. Trying to open up, um, an agency for them, and what that ended up being was a year of working for Samsung Global.
Hmm.
And that could be a podcast in and of itself, where I just tell you the crazy stories about that time, that year of my life when I went back and forth between Korea and New York all the time, and shot some really fun commercials with David Beckham and Dave Franco and a bunch of famous people because they wanted to do that. Like one time, we literally got a call saying, "Hey, we have 2 hours with David Beckham." 2 hours with him 10 days from now. I think of something you can do with him in that time frame. And you're like, and
Quite a long lead time you got given there, Lars, in the advertising world.
and another time we literally got a call as well saying from one of the brand managers there saying make a commercial with James Franco, and we're like, what? I like James Franco. Bye. Um, and then we had to figure out how we wrap the story around him. But it was really, really weird and fun, but also utterly exhausting.
Yeah.
So after a year, I was like, I can't exist at this pace. I
Mm.
just turned 40, and I was like, I literally can't work at this speed. Um, and that coincided actually with my wife getting pregnant with our first child. And we were like, maybe it's time to leave New York. After a decade of working around the clock in New York, we're like, let's go to LA. So we rented a house in LA with a swimming pool, and sat in the sun there with our feet in the water, and kind of like, all right, let's take a deep breath before this next crazy adventure of having kids rolls in. Um, then I ended up getting a call from Google, asking if I'd be interested in coming in to lead the zoo, which is, as you mentioned, a creative think tank for brands and agencies. And that was essentially a team of creative people sitting in 17 countries around the world. But there's
Mhm.
very little sort of structure or shared strategy or shared purpose around what they were doing. And they wanted someone like myself to come in and help them figure out, what is this? How do we talk about it? How should we engage, et cetera, et cetera. So I did that, and ended up spending the next 4 years with Google. And that was such a learning experience.
And this was you looking for a less high pressure job, right?
Well, funnily enough, it actually was in most ways, because we romanticize working insane hours in advertising.
Mm,
The old saying, like, if you don't come in Sundays, don't come in Monday.
mhm,
Um, and I think we've fallen into this weird trap of glamorizing working insane hours.
mm.
It's not particularly productive, and I think that it's we've glamorized it, so that you think you have to in order to feel like you're working in advertising.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
mean, there's some sort of thing that creative people sometimes think like hard work equate or like long work equates to good ideas. And I'm like you. I think I'm the opposite. I'm always trying and striving to find that balance of, I think it's more advantageous for your brain, for your team, for your people to get people home, see their families, experience life, and not in a burnout kind of mentality. because then the creativity is going to be way better, right?
I mean, what I used to tell the kids or the young people coming to New York for the first time to work in advertising at AKQA, Oakley, or Shell, wherever was, listen, I need you to start by going 100 miles inland to a small town in Jersey or Philadelphia and go to the local diner, the local mall, and just soak it all up because that's
Mm.
America. New York's not America. And then I need you to do some other things as well. I need you to take the time off to go see a play, go buy a magazine, like go buy Truckers Monthly or to Orthodontist Weekly or whatever, just some random shit that you can find in a magazine store, and try and dive into other people's realities and start imagining what it's like to live like that instead, and have that be your passion. So just passion sampling, and you can't do that if all you do is study advertising, work in advertising, and spend your time in the office. So
Yeah, it's like Lars. I always say, kind of, I've thought a lot, and I'm sure you obviously will as well. It's like what makes an original idea? What makes something creative? And I've kind of come to this definition that it's like creativity or an original creative idea is usually something that we're really familiar with, and it's as simple as bolting it together with something unexpected, and that shouldn't come from that. And that fusion of something familiar with something unexpected usually only comes, like you say, by going exploring different cultures, seeing different things, hearing how different people live, and seeing different countries, and then you take those ideas and bolt them back together, right?
and if I can add something to that, I would say it's also filtered through your unique personality.
Mm.
Because we all have different sets of experiences, and if you were to tell a vampire story tomorrow, it would be a different vampire story than the one I would tell, because it'd be filtered through my experiences versus your
Mm.
experiences. So you'd have a drunken Glaswegian vampire sitting in a bar somewhere, and mine would be a frosty old vampire in in Copenhagen drinking schnapps.
That's so interesting. Yeah, so it comes through that lens of kind of your own lived experience, your own filter as well. So there's
And
kind of
that's why
three parts to it.
some of the very best storytellers in advertising, people like Jerry Graff, who's
Mm.
some of the funniest commercials in advertising history, you can
Mhm.
tell that there's a singular vision and personality behind it.
Mm.
A lot of clients don't really want you to put too much of a personal imprint on stuff, but when the best in the industry are allowed to do that, really amazing stuff happens.
Yeah, yeah, I know. You sometimes you get a lot of agencies that have got very unique style or output, and you can see they've come through a brain, haven't they? Even if they're generated by a team, they've come through a final brain to kind of come out into the world, and that.
Style is an amazing thing. Of course, it's dangerous as well because then people
Mm.
assume automatically that that's all you can do. But when it works, and it usually works in relatively short periods of time, like most agencies have a life cycle of somewhere around 7 years where they can get to the top, stay on top, and then it starts petering off a little bit. And that's
Mm.
just how those unique things happen in advertising. It's in cycles. Some people then come back up and go back down, come back up, etc.
Mm.
Like Wyden have managed to sort of do this over the last 30 plus years, right?
Yeah,
Um,
it's always really impressive, isn't it? Like when creative companies have lasted that long and stayed at the top.
and it's rare. I mean, there's not a lot of agencies that last much more than, 15, 20 years at best.
Yeah, it's a tough industry. So, right, we're at Google. You've just been handed the keys to the kingdom, chief creative officer, to lead what's, ultimately known as probably, I'd say, one of the most creative companies in the world. And so that's,
Yeah.
there's quite a lot of pressure that comes with that title. There's quite of like, you turn up on day one. What the hell do you do?
You try to stay quiet and listen as much as you can, right? I mean, the first 90 days in any new job, you should mostly just speak when you have something to contribute, but listen mostly, right? And
Mm.
learn. And just to get back to the whole with life work balance, at Google, there was not a premium put on staying late at all.
Mm.
Um, I, I always got the impression that people thought if you had to work really late or weekends there, it's because you weren't very good at your job. If you couldn't get it done within normal working hours, or you were working in a stupid way rather than a smart way, which was so refreshing and
Mm.
and kind of such a novelty after having spent many years previously just thinking like work is life.
Yeah.
Um, but you also meet a whole bunch of people who are not living and breathing advertising and marketing and don't speak the lingo, etc. So you kind of had to learn how to speak engineer as well
Mm.
and wrap your head around why is it beneficial for somebody to be spending part of their time on creating this with a marketing purpose rather than creating some hardcore tech things that is their primary function. So there's a lot of internal evangelism as well that you had to do.
Mm.
And but I thought it was. I mean, I met some of the absolute smartest people I've met in my entire life during my years at Google. Like genuinely, incredibly impressive people.
Mhm.
And sometimes you'd be like, wow, if we could only just let them loose on some client's marketing budget and give them all the money, they would do stuff that was so much more interesting than what anybody else is doing.
Yeah.
Mm. But that wasn't always possible to do. But I highly recommend trying to go client side in some way, shape, or form to just learn much more about what makes them tick and how they function versus how an agency functions. Because you'll become much better at selling, you'll become much better at understanding, and empathy goes a really long way when you're sitting down with a client.
Yeah, and I'm interested in the kind of, you know, the culture at Google and, what again, this will be down to your creative leadership and, how did you how did you make sure you got the best out of those creative teams? How did you make sure that there wasn't a divide between sort of programmer, developer,
Mhm.
product and creativity? How did you get did you fight to gain access to those creative brains and kind of did you have kind of core values that you as a leader would put into your team? Like, and I don't kind of mean at the Google level, did you have that autonomy to go, like, well, this is my piece and, here's how I want to lead that?
I mean, yes and no, because you're always at the mercy of your internal clients, right? Which were essentially the ones taking care of the largest accounts that Google had. So we're
Hmm.
talking about, Fortune 500 companies from around the world, literally the biggest companies in the world who are also
Yeah.
spending fortunes with Google. And ultimately, they were responsible for assuring that they got a return on investment. So you never had total freedom. And one of the challenges of that role was, I think I mentioned that my team was in 17 countries around the world.
Mm.
And it was about 175 people or so altogether, if I recall correctly. So relatively small groups spread geographically around the globe. And that's when you fully realize that a global role is a very strange thing to have. Because kind of by default and by the power of distances, you can't be omnipresent everywhere. So
Hmm.
now if you sit down and do a little bit of math, say, all right, I have 17 offices that I need to visit twice a year. Then you have meetings with clients around the world in various places as well. Plus, you have internal offsites, et cetera, et cetera. I live on a plane.
Yeah.
I mean, I would come out to LAX, the airport in Los Angeles, and like the people there working at United at Delta would know me by name and be like, "Where are you going today, Lars?" And then when everybody knows you by name, you're there too much. You should not be coming to the airport that often. Um, so it was a challenge for my family life for sure to be
Yeah.
gone.
That was my next question because you'd mentioned this was just as you started a
Yeah.
young family, right?
Yeah, it was, and when my son was born, 3 years later, it was sort of time to pack it in, and it was impossible to do with two small kids at home, unless you want to completely outsource having a family, which would have made little sense because then why have one to begin with? And that's actually an interesting point. Is that most people in global leadership roles that I've met are either single or childless
Mm.
because it is so hard to keep up any kind of family life if you're constantly traveling the world.
Yeah. And do you think that's got easier with, how we're now on,
Yes.
remote calls like we are now? Like, because obviously in the past, this would have had to been a flight to get somewhere
The
to do this.
pandemic changed everything
Mm.
because now we can do things remotely. And I've also found that, that was also one of the reasons why I figured I can move back to Denmark because it's a great place to raise kids,
Mm.
much better than America, if you ask me. Because America has gone a little bit off the rails in the last few years. I don't know if you noticed. Um, I think we all have. Um, but anyway, after that, I realized I could be based in Copenhagen and still work globally, which I do. I mean, I still travel a lot and I still go all
Yeah.
over the world, but not nearly as much as I used to.
Mm. And so, right, okay. So, what year was that then at Google that you finished up in terms of the role
I
there?
finished up Google at 18, and then the next couple of years, I was living in LA and mostly just working on advising startups.
Hmm.
Um, on how to go to market, how to advertise themselves, and how to think about branding in general. That was really fun. I mean, I also had two small kids at home that I got to spend a lot more time with than I had previously, which was part of the plan. Like, if I'm not traveling the world anymore, I don't want to jump into another high-powered job where I have to do the same sort of thing again. I should
Yeah.
be able to spend that time with them, and you don't get that back. So, highly recommend that.
Yeah, and that's great to hear. And obviously 2018 then, right? 2018, 19, that's going to be, is that where your AI sort of story starts to converge here and your head started getting into that space?
And a little bit later, I mean, in 2017, that paper about transformers, not the action figures, but the things that are powering, it's the T in ChatGPT transformer, right?
Okay.
That was a paper that was published by researchers at Google. And there
Hmm.
was murmuring around the buildings that something really, really epic was starting to happen, and this was something that would be pursued in the future. Machine learning had taken a quantum leap forward.
Mm.
I can't claim to fully understand what was going on at the time, but I could certainly see when I overheard people extrapolate from the paper to what would soon become
That's what
possible.
everyone was calling it, wasn't it? It was machine learning was the
Yeah,
kind of phrase that everyone was using at that time.
yeah. You could definitely tell that something was coming.
Mm.
But for me, it wasn't really until I was sitting one night in 2022 and I was reading about this new site called Midjourney.
Hmm.
And I was like, that sounds fun. So I went to Discord, and as we all know, Discord is a hellscape, invented by a deceased mind. Um,
I love that term, hellscape.
it is the least user-friendly experience that you're likely to ever have. But somehow it works because the stuff that's happening in there is driven by geeks who are willing to take the time to figure the navigation stuff out and get at it. And I have this thing that's a creative. I'm always a little reticent about is that I can't draw. I have no sort of spatial perspective at
Mm.
all. I
Hmm.
mean, nothing that I try to draw looks anything like what was going on in my head. The translation from here to paper just is non-existent.
I've got the same problem as well. I think my mum tried to nurture in me when I was young, get me done, but just when I see people that can properly draw,
I know, right?
it's like wild, isn't it?
And yeah, whenever you see people in advertising, so I'm just gonna quickly sketch something up and go, "Dude,
It's like,
I wish I could do it." Anyway, but so I'm sitting there playing around with Midjourney, and I mean, it's still kind of shit. But I remember I asked for um, a painting of Marilyn Monroe in the style of Salvador Dali,
mm,
one of my very first prompts, and I'm like, what came back was not great, but it wasn't awful either. And suddenly your mind goes, well, it's only going to get better.
uh-huh.
And then I fell headfirst into the rabbit hole, and have
Yeah.
been sort of falling ever since.
Well, I was. It's interesting you say Midjourney was your first. That was mine as well. That was, and it must be similar sort of times. 21, 22. We had a creative technologist on our team at the time, and they'd been tinkering about, and I was looking over the shoulder. I was like, "What's that?" And it's like, it's AI tool. It's this image generation tool. And I remember that night I went home, installed it, and I was deep in the rabbit hole. I look back at some of the stuff now, it looks terrible, but it was that feeling, isn't it? It's kind of like you say, you've got this disconnect with like, we've got a creative brain and we've seen so many creative things and you know what you're trying to create, but you've got this disconnect between your arm and you're not able to sometimes get there. And the only way to get your output is to go and build teams, get people, and suddenly you've got this instant return on what was in your brain.
Yeah, yeah. And I sort of, after playing around with it for a couple of months, I'm like, all right, let's see if you can actually sort of pressure test this. So I decided to make a picture book. And should I do, one animal for each letter of the alphabet,
Hmm.
same style? And could I do a font made out of animal parts to do like the A's and the B's that would start these chapters? And today that sounds like, yeah, you basically probably do what I did, that project, you do it in a day. It was an absolute shit show, epic proportions to get it done. But you muddle through and you kind of set yourself a goal. And I ended up putting together this book called Animals on the Verge, a picture book for adults,
Hmm.
and published it, self-published it on Amazon, just to say like, listen, I created an artifact, and it's such an artifact of its time that it's just
Hmm.
really fun to have copies of it as well. Um, but then, because I've been posting about the process that I was going through with creating this book, all of a sudden I became, a pocket expert on this. And people would start hitting me up on Facebook and LinkedIn and going, how do I do this? Can you come talk to us about what you're doing? And I was like, oh, I guess now I'm an expert um, in all of this. And of course, at that point in time, I'd also started posting about what are the potential implications for advertising, for the creation of content, for the creation of film, et cetera, et cetera. So Yeah, I guess because when you dive in deeply enough into something, ultimately you do become the expert
Mm,
in it. So I started doing a lot of conferences, a lot of talking about it, and eventually I was like, well, most of the conferences I go to, either as an attendee or as a speaker, are pretty shit. And there's just not a lot of interesting creative content uh,
hmm
on the AI, and that led to me starting a Scandinavian Creative AI Summit back in 23,
hmm
where it was basically, what if I invited all the most interesting people I can think of to come for a day of real creative thinking around AI in one location? So
hmm
it was basically because I couldn't find the conference I was looking for. I'm like, oh, God damn it, I'm going to have to do it myself. And luckily, my partner, Klaus, he has been running other conferences for the last 15, 20 years. So he was like, listen, you take the programming director hat and the host hat. I will take care of the whole back end of everything. So
Yeah.
it's a perfect partnership where I don't know shit about putting on a conference. He knows everything about that. So it was perfect for us to partner up on that. So yeah,
Mm.
the fourth one coming up in next year on June 4th in Copenhagen.
And I'm definitely coming to this one because I told you I booked a ticket to the last one, didn't I? But I couldn't make it, so
I know
I'm
you get a freebie for this one.
coming. So like the subject then, right, Lars? Because it's pretty. There's some people super pro. There's some people way against it, and we know it's a delicate subject in the creative landscape. And I'm like you. I don't know. I've found it really refreshing. I found it fun. It's given me like a childlike playfulness again. It's given me new tools to play with. I feel like I'm opening Photoshop up again for the first time, and I've got all this new stuff, but now I can just do it faster. And I
Yeah.
feel like, like I spoke earlier on, like some of the weaknesses I've got is my brain in terms of structure and organization. I've got like LLMs that are supporting me with that. But like some people and some creatives are finding a real hard time. And, it's fair, I think, for a point because I've heard some sort of harrowing stories about creatives. I spoke to my friend Chris Greta the other day, and he's got like a super talented daughter who's an illustrator. And he showed me some of her work, and she's got one of those brains that we don't have, the ones that like think it and she can draw it. But she stopped doing illustration because she's so kind of jaded that, oh, well, it's kind of, she feels like it's devalued. She's no longer doing it. Obviously you're talking a lot about this. You're coming across creative people. What are you hearing? What's coming into the world for you?
I mean, I sort of coined a term, Wonderpanic, around this, right? Where, on one hand, it's clear, blue eyed, staring, open eyed wonder. And on one hand, it's utter despair and panic around what does this all mean for my livelihood and for where the world is going. And, you have to be capable of holding both those thoughts in your head at the same time
Mm,
because both of them are equally true.
yeah,
Um, and it is challenging. But if you look at it historically, whenever a new technology has come around that was genuinely disruptive, there's always been some people who've been impacted by that. Uh,
yeah,
you don't see a lot of typographers around anymore, right?
mm,
Um, and it's horrible because I appreciate a great illustrator as much as anyone, especially because I can't do it myself. I'm just in awe of their ability to translate ideas in their head into something on paper or screen. But I understand if she's getting to a point where she's like, it might be hard to make a living off of this future. It might be important for me to pursue at least maybe different modes of income. That said, I would also, if I were her, spend some time trying to see how can these tools superpower me?
yeah.
What is it that I can learn here that will make me faster, more productive, or maybe even capable of going to places creatively that I wasn't able to do before? So I think giving up is not the answer, but thinking about how this extra arm that you've grown or can grow if you want to can actually make you a better bundle. It's quite.
I love that you say that because that's where my brain goes with it. I was so sad when I heard that she'd given it up because I was like, no, you've given up too soon. And I think as a creative brain, it's kind of our role almost like to, we've got to like wield creativity and we've got to use curiosity, right, is our biggest strength. And I love that analogy of you've now got another arm. So like what is possible? And I read something the other day and someone said, like, imagine you gave Picasso AI. What would Picasso do with AI, right? He's not going to give up painting. He's going to do something that's like unbelievable. And I think, we've, been involved in so many campaigns and things that I think it's not like AI is going to replace everything, right? Because when you create a campaign, when you build everything, it's about storytelling. And often the magic of the storytelling, like I was just on a call before this, brainstorming an event, but the event hero piece of artwork is only going to come to life in collaboration with an artist, because we want the artist's story and we want their values and we want their human part as part of the output. And it could be that we collaborate with them and AI to get the output, but that makes the story. So it's like, you almost want to encourage, just think about what you could use if it's just a tool in your armory.
Yeah. And it comes back to what I was saying a little while ago about the unique filter that is in your experiences and your lived life. You know, there is no magic make really personable AI art or make really interesting AI film, et cetera, et cetera. It's all about what the person playing ping pong with the machine is doing, right? And I see it as a bit of a dance. It's sort of a back and forth, right? If you create an image in Midjourney, be like, okay, it's not quite what I'm looking for. I'll reprompt it a little bit. We'll dance a little bit here. Maybe you'll take it and go to another image generator and try what you learned working with Midjourney there. Then you'll try and animate something. Well, that doesn't quite work. Maybe I need some extra image. I mean, it is literally a dance. And
That's a
that's
nice
what
way to
makes
put
it
it.
so fun. But also, I'm the one who's standing in the middle leading. I'm the leading man in this dance, right?
Yeah, you're the
I'm not
conductor,
being
aren't you? And you've still got to hold it up to the world to say this is the combination of all the different things that my brain
yeah,
put together.
yes. And the other day I sort of said to someone I think was inspired by hanging out with you, said, don't let the assistant usurp the magician, right? Because we're the magicians, and we should not let the assistant be the one sawing us in half. It should be the other way.
To make sense of
And
that for
again,
anyone
if you keep
listening,
that in mind,
I was just going to say, to make sense for anyone listening, it's because my talk was that we delivered together was the magic of creativity. So just if that didn't make any sort of sense. Sorry,
no, I
Lars.
guess not actually. No, but you see what I mean? It's like the dancing with magicians could be the headline for your next talk.
Mm.
And I really find that the human aspect and also the stuff you see, the best stuff you see coming out there has such a specific point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Um, now we should talk about Sora too, and and
Mm-hmm.
and that whole bailiwick, because that is something new that has just arrived, and I'm not sure how I feel about it yet.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm having incredible,
yeah, no, I'm,
but
I'm glad you brought it up. Sorry, but I think we got a slight delay there. So, yeah, like because you kindly sent me a code the other day, right? And I couldn't get access to Sora 2, so I've not played with it, right? But you've been playing with it, so I'm really keen to hear from the creator's perspective how that's been feeling. From the person that's been seeing it appear on my feed, right? Because there are loads of creators, they're all using it. I don't know whether they've got a campaign going behind the scenes and they've got loads of people using it. I found it really irritating, this one. I don't know what it is. There's something about it that as soon as they pop on my screen and I see that little Sora watermark, I'm pushing them past to show me a human being next. And I don't know what that is, but maybe you give me a bit of insight in terms of how it's been feeling playing with the tool.
it's an odd duck, really, because just for those who don't know, what Sora 2 really is an app on iPhone only at the moment, and only available in the US or Canada. But what it is a new kind of social network, really, or like an AI TikTok, if you will, where you can create these 10-second videos. But the big deal here, I think, is that you could do what they call cameos. So you do
Mm-hmm.
a little recording of yourself. You read some numbers out loud, and you do a video of the front and the side of your face. And then
Yeah.
they can recreate you in fairly high fidelity in whatever absurd situation you find yourself in
Mm.
or want to put yourself in. And you can take whoever has done a cameo of themselves and put into your videos. So if you tick your little box to say my persona, my profile is public, then I can take you and put you into my video. So I had like a speed eating competition with Sam Altman the other day, and that just means that you can produce these things fairly quickly with a minimum of input. But again, you're seeing that the most fun is when really creative people come up with absurd scenarios. That's when
Yeah.
it can be quite fun. But a lot of this is literally just slop, and more slop. And you scroll through the feed, and most of it is just completely like a waste of AI processing power for sure. And
Yeah. And
I
for
think that
anyone
goes
that's
back
not,
to
oh, sorry, I was just going to say, for anyone who's not heard the word slop, that is the official term for this kind of mediocre
yeah,
nothingness that AI can create, right?
yeah. And it comes down to what we were talking about a little earlier. Just because someone hands you a paintbrush does not make you Picasso.
Mm,
Um, and there's a lot of people, working very hard at becoming artists, and just have to realize at a certain point the talent's not there. Now you can make these 10-second videos, but just because you can doesn't mean you're good at it.
mm,
So, I mean, I guess the same thing is technically true for a TikTok. Everyone can make a short video, but not everyone can get to 1 million followers.
yeah.
Um, but this is just, it's a weird form of creative expression that's prompt based and generates video and running around this feed. Now, what is fascinating about it is how good it is at filling in the blanks.
Hmm.
So if I write a prompt saying two people working in advertising doing a podcast, it will be able to think of some dialogue that we would probably be having. That's relatively likely that it could be part of that conversation. So it's very good at figuring out the blanks and creating, the backdrop and the visuals, et cetera, et cetera. So it's smart. It's very smart
Mm.
in terms of doing that. And of course, the drawbacks to this is that you can put all kinds of people in all kinds of situations. And if you don't know that this is AI generated, because it's very low resolution, but you can still upres it and get it to a point where it actually looks like video. Um, it's challenging. I mean, I think the whole world is challenged right now in terms of, what is real and what's not, and how do we even settle on a shared reality if we can't tell if what we're looking at is real.
I know it's a funny one. I mean, I did, what was concerned, concerning everyone, right? All this deep fake stuff and now how easy this becomes. I wonder, like, in terms of, Sam Altman, he's there, he's created this tool. And obviously, to kickstart this thing, right, he's put his own avatar in there, allowing people to do this. But what it did to me over the last few days, I saw so many Sam Altman videos on my feed that even if a real video of him came up on my feed, I'm now ignoring it. So, like, I don't know the personal benefit it has to his brand, his person, his credibility. And it's going to happen to us all, right? Someone will create one of you, me, and, suddenly, our gran, our mum thinks it's real. No one knows what's real. So suddenly we break the internet in terms of credibility. And I don't know, like, is this where then the blockchain converges? And, blockchain is about, was always about trying to sort of legitimize where something's come from content wise. And is that where NFTs come back and blockchain and AI all converge?
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know?
it might be that this is finally the time when Web3 and blockchain actually become something that's useful for anybody who's not a crypto bro. Is the challenge with Web3 and the blockchain has always been no one fucking understands it. I mean, it's so goddamn complicated to explain that
Let's
that
not try.
let's definitely not try it. I was asked yesterday when I was talking in Poland whether I thought some what you just mentioned actually was a reality in waiting, and I was like, thank God I know a little bit about this because otherwise. um, but yes, I think some sort of agreement upon what constitutes a shared reality is necessary for us to function as a society.
Mm,
We can't just say that nothing is real anymore. That is nihilism at its most, you know, terrifying. Because if
mm,
nothing is real, then why should we believe in anything or anyone? And that leads to the ultimate in egotism, right? Not having a shared reality with anyone else. And I think
yeah.
we're already seeing that in play out in many arenas around the world, especially with young people who
Mm.
have gotten selfish to a point of not being able to function with others.
Hmm. Well, maybe, I mean, maybe like, I kind of saw what Sora were doing. I saw that might happen in terms of you'll have social media platforms where you can only share AI content, but maybe that's where it ends up. Maybe all of the AI stuff, if it's got metadata, etc., and it knows there's been any sort of manipulation AI wise, maybe it all lives on one platform.
But another way of doing it would be to have, and that could be something happening on the blockchain where if enough people mark this as actual reality, then it becomes an accepted part of reality, and and vice versa. If enough people say this is not reality, then you'd agree that it is not reality. But I think we just have to help each other figure out what is reality, ensure that we have a shared vision of what is the world and what is the world not.
Yeah, and I think it's just going to make more valuable in-person experiences, in-person events. All of this stuff's going to come back, right? And that's probably a good thing, right? It's because the world always swings
Great.
in one direction really far and then comes back, hopefully somewhere in the middle, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes this whole AI thing reminds me a little bit of. Remember that Thomas Winterberg movie, The Party, Festen, where he's giving a speech for his dad's, I think, 75th birthday. And he's got like a yellow speech and a green speech, and you can pick one of the two. And they're both these horrible revelations about the abuse that the father exposed all the kids to over the years. And the other one's like much nicer. And you can do the same thing with AI right now. Right? You can have the dystopian version, and you can have the utopian version, and you can really argue for either side with a lot of conviction. Um, Hence, again, back to Wonderpanic.
On dystopian, I've got another guest that's coming on the show today, right? Because when me and you were over in Lithuania, I was telling you about a little project that I was tinkering with. I'd basically, for anyone listening, I'd come across a video, search it up on TikTok or Instagram, of, if you remember, those Billy the Bass fish, right? Those fish, they were famous 1998, 1999, I think. Everyone had one of these little fish in their home. You pressed a button, it sang a song. That's all this little fish did. But I saw a version where someone had hacked it with ChatGPT and they put Arnold Schwarzenegger's voice in the fish, and it had become, and they trained it to become a personal trainer, right? This is the weirdest, most dystopian thing I could have said. But it inspired creativity in me, and it sent me off on a path to figure out how the hell they can do that. Now, I am not a programmer, but again, back to our point earlier, I have ChatGPT, I have all of these tools at my disposal. So I found a tutorial, I briefed ChatGPT, I said to it, look, I want to build this thing. First of all, I want you to tell me every single piece of hardware that I'm going to need to build this fish, and I want to understand how I'm going to hack it with ChatGPT. And I began, right? Now, I'm going to bring it onto screen. They always say don't do live demos, but we're going to try and do a live demo on this podcast, Lars. And I think let's just bring Billy into screen. Let me know. Can you see him perfectly on screen there?
There he is.
Is he there? Right. Okay. So for anyone who is listening audio only, I would encourage you to go and look at the video now. However, what I have behind me, I've got Billy the Bass. We ripped out his internal guts, and I did this all following a tutorial. I'll post a link somewhere in the comments to it. And then I bought, it's like a Raspberry Pi. I don't know how to program a Raspberry Pi, but I was able to vibe code this whole thing using ChatGPT. So I kind of had two windows open, right, Lars? I had the tutorial, I had my little terminal window in Mac OS, and I was basically just pasting in commands, and then it would give me all sorts of errors. I would fire it back across and so on, back and forth, just using these tools until I got green light, green light, green light, green light. Now, little bit of a disclaimer before I open this thing up to the world. It's a horrible fish, right? Because I learned how to plug in OpenAI's API. So this is connected live on the internet to OpenAI. And I didn't realize that it's got all sorts of tools that you can unleash on like an AI assistant. So I have programmed this thing. Now it has a voice of its own. So this is not me talking, but it's now got a Scottish accent. I've told it to be really aggressive, to be sarcastic, no warmth, and to roast anyone and anything that it comes across in terms of anyone that speaks to it. Now, fingers crossed, if this works, we should have it. Now, I warn you, for anyone listening, it also swears a lot. Okay, so remember it is Scottish, and we use swearing a lot. So, right, Lars, are we ready for this?
Can anyone ever really be ready for this?
I don't know. Right, let's see. Let's see if we turn it on. It's never going to work. You know what's going to happen here, right? But let's try. Oh wait, Billy, are you there?
Right. Listen up, you rocket. What's happening? Sounding like you just woke up from a pure nap there. Gonna spit it out, or you're gonna keep yawning?
Well, Billy, I'm here. I'm actually on a podcast at the moment. It's called Just a Chat With. It's a brand and creativity podcast. We have sort of brilliant creative minds on it. And I'm here with a guy called Lars Bastholm. He's like a super creative brain. He knows loads about AI, but I want you to roast him.
Right. Lars Bastholm, eh? Sounds like a lad that thinks AI stands for absolute idiot. Here, Lars, bestie, no offense, but your creative patter's probably pure giving PowerPoint slide energy. The way your brain's living rent-free in this podcast, absolute weapon behavior, no cap.
Well, Billy, I would love for you to tell me a little bit more about our host, Andrew Dobbie.
Oh, here we go. Andrew Dobbie, eh? Sounds like a guy that drinks a pure oat milk latte and calls it a creative journey. Probably thinks Canva's cutting edge. But I'll DM this. He's hosting you dafties, so he's got Gallus energy at least.
You're not a very nice fish, are you?
Nice? Mate, I was born in a claddy puddle in Maryhill. No a Disney movie. Gonna no expect hugs and kisses from a fish that's pure built for roasting. You came to the wrong river if you want nice.
So, Billy, I've always wanted to ask a fish what their favorite movies are. Can you talk to me about your favorite movies and why you love them?
Right. Movie time, eh? Pure classic. Train Spotting. Mad, mental, and bleak as fuck. Just like Glasgow, nay filter. And Finding Nemo? Aye, it's for Waynes. But that wee fish went through some shite. Respect. It's given survival core.
Are you a Gen Z fish?
Aye, no cap. I'm pure Gen Z. Fur. Born in the Clyde, raised on memes, TikTok scrolling with my fins. The way I roast folk, that's Gen Z pish, and you know it.
Well, I think that's enough of Billy. I think this is the weirdest possible interview I've ever had in my life. But that's like, we've just mashed together some creativity, right? That couldn't have existed without any AI tools. And yeah, I don't know. What's your thoughts?
First of all, I'm thrilled to be on what may be the world's first AI-enabled fish podcast. So I'm going to add that to my bio as soon as we finish this recording. But no, I think this exemplifies all the fun that's out there to be had by, taking unrelated things, mashing them together and adding AI. And the ability we have with our third arms now to create these new superpower tools. It's just a good laugh, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think there's the fish, but what you learn putting that together, I'm sure is going to, sit in your brain and eventually going to come out as something that may be slightly more constructive than having an assaulting fish. But that's just how we're playing these days.
I know. I was thinking like, what personality do I give this? And I was trying to figure out, and I was actually trying to figure out what does OpenAI let you wield here in amongst the API, and it only seems to have a few accents, and weirdly, Scottish was one of them. I tried to make it in a Donald Trump fish, because I imagined like little blonde hair and little orange face, and I was going to paint that on it and try, but it didn't let me do that for political reasons.
I did a presentation for a bunch of radio people not too long ago where I cloned Orson Welles' voice. Mm-hmm. So I basically did part of my presentation as a conversation on stage with Orson Welles. And you can do these things now with voice cloning. Again, so you can't trust what you hear, you can't trust what you see, etc. So back to our shared reality. But I mean, 11 Labs is another incredibly fun tool to play around with. Also, just the fact that you can get it to read books or things you've written, reading different character voices and different voices, etc. I mean, the playing ground for the written word when you add audio on top of it just becomes fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to bring Billy the Fish. He's going to come along to the next Creative AI Summit, so we can maybe have some fun with him there.
We should give him, a slot where he can basically do his presentation about what it's like to be an AI-enabled fish. I mean, with that as a title in the program, I'd show up just for that.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. Same. Right, well, Lars, I'm very conscious I've taken up loads of your time and you've been really generous with it. You've been an absolute delight to talk with today. I just wonder, maybe on a leaving note for our listeners today, if you were starting your creative career again in this moment with AI, with everything you've learned in hindsight, what bits of nuggets or advice would you give to some of our younger listeners who are just getting started?
Jump in, immerse yourself. Try out as many of the tools as you can get your hands on. Try to make little things, try to make long things. Fail a lot, fail fast. Because the good thing here is you can fail fast. Because many of these tools, will allow you to just hack something together and see if it works. And if it doesn't, try again in a different way. I mean, but most of all, have fun while doing it. Because eventually, at some point, if you're trying to be a professional creative, someone will tell you how to think and how to do things and then what the expected outcome is. While you're still just you and warming up to become professional in this field, play around. When I look at young creatives' portfolios, I pay just as much attention to their personal work as I do to their professional work, because you can actually often better tell who that person is by looking at their personal work. So have fun. That's why you enter into this sort of industry, is because you don't want to do the shit jobs that you see your mates doing, where they're bored to tears after being in an office for 10 days. You want to do something fun.
I love it. I love it. Play around. Let's leave it on that. Lars, thanks so much.